They even let you in this house. My father sneered, his voice sharp enough to slice through bone. You're not even my real daughter. I didn't flinch. Not anymore. I stood in the middle of the dining room, heart pounding but spine stiff, wearing the same black blouse I'd bought with my first paycheck and the same scuffed boots they used to laugh at. Before we begin, drop a comment and tell us where are you from and from which city you're watching our videos? And after watching the whole video, don't forget to tell us what would you do in this situation? Be honest, tell me in the comments below. We read every comment. Let's begin. My fingers trembled, not from fear, but from how tightly I gripped the folded paper in my coat pocket. It crinkled like a secret waiting to scream. At the table, my stepmother, Elaine, didn't even look at me. She just reached for her wine glass and gave a slow, calculated nod like she was confirming a business deal. Honestly, Alan, she muttered, lips curving into something half sweet, half venom. Maybe it's time she learned her place. Everyone paused. My half-sister Kennedy leaned back, flipping her bleached blonde hair over one shoulder, her lips curled into a smirk. Her fiancé chuckled under his breath. And my older brother Jason didn't even look up from his phone. It was like I was nothing. Like I was wallpaper in a room built to erase me. I swallowed the lump in my throat. And then, tell them, a voice rasped. Every head turned. My grandfather, slouched in the wheelchair at the corner of the room, stared directly at me. His fingers were thin, veins raised beneath translucent skin, but his eyes were steel. Tell them what you found in the safe. The air shifted. The smirk slipped from Kennedy's face. Elaine's glass froze mid-sip. I felt it before I even opened my mouth, that invisible shiver crawling down every spine. The kind that whispers, this night won't end the way it started. I reached into my coat pocket. The paper was heavier now, like truth always is. I wasn't looking for anything. I began, voice low, thick. I was just cleaning out Grandpa's old study like he asked. But the drawer behind the bookshelf, it wasn't locked. Not really. And in the back, taped under the shelf, was this. I unfolded the paper slowly, letting their eyes follow every move. Jason put his phone down. Elaine sat straighter. My father's knuckles whitened around his fork. This is a DNA test, I said. Silence. It's dated 24 years ago. A paternity test. I glanced at my grandfather. He gave the faintest nod. I looked back at the table, at the people who had spent years telling me I wasn't one of them, that I didn't belong, that I was just some burden left behind after Mom died. This test proves that he isn't my biological father, I said, jerking my chin toward Alan. Elaine exhaled sharply. Exactly. That's what we've said for years. I smiled, but it was cold, razor-edged. No. You don't understand. I flipped the page. There's a second result. And I let it drop onto the table like a live grenade. It proves that you, I said, eyes locking with Elaine, are not Kennedy's mother. The silence was suffocating. What the hell are you talking about? My father barked, standing up so fast his chair screeched across the floor. I looked him straight in the eye. You want to talk about who belongs and who doesn't? Let's talk about the baby you brought home after a business trip and forced Mom to raise as her own. Let's talk about the real reason she started drinking. Elaine's face paled. That's a lie, she hissed. Grandpa cleared his throat, loudly. No, it's not. All heads whipped toward him. I paid for the test. I made sure the truth didn't die with her, he said, his voice steady despite his frail body. And I kept that file hidden until she, he pointed at me, was strong enough to find it herself. My breath caught in my throat. He had known. All these years. You said nothing, my father growled. You said plenty, Grandpa shot back. Enough to ruin a little girl's life. I figured the least I could do was make sure she had the ammunition when the time came. Elaine stood now too, glass trembling in her hand. This isn't true. This is some twisted manipulation. Then explain this. I pulled out the second envelope. Bank statements. Transfers. From your personal account to a woman named Trisha Lawrence. Monthly. For 18 years. Elaine's mouth dropped open. Kennedy blinked. She was Kennedy's real mother, wasn't she? I asked, voice breaking just slightly. She died 3 years ago, and no one ever knew. Enough, my father thundered. This is our family. You don't belong here. You never did. Grandpa slammed his hand on the table, louder than anyone thought possible for a man in a wheelchair. Then maybe you should tell her what you did to her mother, Alan. Or should I? I stood frozen. What? What is he talking about? I asked, voice barely audible. Alan's eyes flickered, and for the first time I saw it. Fear. The kind of fear that comes when secrets start crawling out of their graves. My grandfather's words hung in the air like a gunshot in a church. My legs stiffened. I stared at Alan, my so-called father, as his face twisted, not with rage this time, but panic. What did you do to Mom? I asked again, louder now, the trembling in my voice replaced with steel. He didn't answer. Grandpa did. She was going to leave, he said. The day before her car went off that bridge, she came to me. She said she'd had enough. Of the lies. Of the abuse. Of pretending this was a family. My heart thudded in my ears. She said she was taking you and disappearing. That she'd already packed a bag. No, I breathed. No, no, no. Elaine sank into her chair, face white as bone. She said she had evidence, Grandpa continued, and that she wasn't going down without it. I grabbed the back of a chair for balance. The room tilted. Jason looked sick. Kennedy sat perfectly still. She didn't fall asleep at the wheel, I whispered. He made it look like an accident. Lies. Alan roared. This old man is losing his damn mind. Grandpa chuckled darkly. You think I'd open this can of worms without proof? He nodded at me. I turned slowly to the duffel bag near the door. The tapes, I said. What tapes? Kennedy asked, voice brittle. I unzipped the bag and pulled out a small shoebox wrapped in worn duct tape. I found these in the attic crawlspace, I said. A box of old VHS tapes, labeled by year. Some were just home videos, but some... My voice cracked. Some were recordings of arguments. Late night shouting. Her crying. His voice threatening her. Jason stood up abruptly, pacing now. You can't be serious. I digitized one, I said quietly. Want to hear it? No, Alan snapped. You're not playing anything. I already did, I said. To the lawyer. To the authorities. They're reopening the case. Elaine shot to her feet. You've ruined everything. I turned to her slowly, letting years of silent humiliation harden into something unbreakable. No, I said. You did. I gave you a home, she spat. No. You gave me rules. Scraps. Reminders that I wasn't yours. Not even a damn bed of my own until I was 11. Jason was now pacing harder, sweat on his forehead. Grandpa cleared his throat again. We're not done. You're enjoying this, Alan snarled. Grandpa smiled faintly. Not enjoying. Just satisfied. You made my granddaughter believe she was nothing. Now, she'll know who she really is. My voice steadied. There's more, I said, walking to the dining room cabinet and pulling out a brown folder. Jason muttered. Oh, come on. These are property records. I continued. Turns out, when Mom married Alan, she brought a hefty trust from her own parents. The house, the land, the business, they were all in her name. Alan flinched. But after her death, you quietly transferred the assets to yourself, I said, looking directly at him. You forged the documents. You buried her will. Elaine's nails tapped the table nervously. I found the real one, I said. Grandpa kept it. I pulled out the yellow document and laid it on the table. My name, my full legal name, was written on the top. Primary beneficiary, Ava Grace Whitman. My hands shook as I laid out the final nail. As of this morning, all properties, accounts, and legal control have been transferred to me. I didn't come here for forgiveness. I came to reclaim what was stolen. Alan staggered back like he'd been punched. You little. I'd sit down if I were you, Grandpa cut in. You're trespassing. You can't do this. Elaine shrieked. I already did. She turned to Kennedy. Say something. But Kennedy was staring at me now, not with hatred, with fear, and a strange flicker of something else. Recognition, maybe, or the realization that the game had changed, and I was now holding all the cards. I'm not leaving, I said, eyes scanning the room. Not this time. Not ever again. Alan opened his mouth, then froze when the front door burst open. A uniformed officer stepped in, eyes scanning the room before locking on me. Miss Whitman, he said, we've finished reviewing the files. Your statements check out. Mr. Alan Whitman, you're under investigation for document fraud and obstruction in a death investigation. The color drained from Alan's face. This is insane. She's manipulating everyone. But the officer wasn't listening. He stepped forward, and Alan stumbled back into his seat, deflated, unraveled. My breath finally released. Not because justice had been fully served, but because I had finally stopped waiting for someone to rescue me. I had become my own rescue. They followed him out in handcuffs. My father, the man who once locked me in the garage for talking back. The man who whispered to neighbors that I was a charity case, that he was too kind to throw me out. The same man who sat smugly in his leather chair while I ate cold leftovers alone on the kitchen floor. Now he stumbled down the porch steps with a detective on either side, his wrists bound, his voice desperate. You don't understand. She's setting me up. I'm her father. But no one was listening. Not the neighbors who had stepped onto their lawns. Not the officer reading his rights. And definitely not me. Inside, Elaine was pacing like a cornered animal, lips red and trembling, mascara smeared from tears that weren't rooted in grief. Just panic. You don't know what you're doing, she hissed. I know exactly what I'm doing, I replied calmly. She froze, startled by the certainty in my voice. For years, you convinced me I was unworthy, that I was lucky to have scraps. That silence was the price of shelter. You had a lot of rules, Elaine. You controlled every breath I took under this roof. But you forgot one thing. She blinked, still pacing. I was watching. I reached into the same duffel bag and pulled out the final file, the one that Grandpa had asked me to keep until the last moment. This, I said, holding it up, is a full breakdown of your embezzlement. 10 years ago, you started siphoning money from the family business. Small amounts, but it added up. Kennedy looked up sharply. Wait, what? Elaine's face crumpled. You don't understand. Don't lie to her, I said. Not anymore. I tossed the folder on the table. Credit cards, wire transfers, a fake consulting firm. I traced it all. You funneled over $300,000 to a private account in Tennessee. You used Jason's name as a shell to hide it. Jason staggered back. What? It's why your credit is in ruins, I told him. She used you. Just like she used all of us. Jason stared at Elaine like she was a stranger. Kennedy shook her head, voice cracking. You said we were barely staying afloat. And she was, I said, on your father's dime. Yours. Mine. Everyone's. Grandpa finally wheeled himself into the center of the room. You see now, he rasped, why I stayed quiet all those years. Because the truth needed time. And now it's time. Elaine dropped into a chair, defeated. I never wanted this, she whispered. No, I said, stepping forward. You wanted control. And you got it. But here's the thing about control, it slips. I opened my phone. Channel 9 News, I said. Already picked it up. Police statement just released. They're listing this house under investigation. And guess who's still listed as its rightful owner on the real deed? Her face twisted in horror. Me. Elaine tried to stand. You can't kick me out. I can. And I will. Her eyes flashed. You don't have the guts. I turned to the hallway and called out. Mrs. Espinoza? The longtime housekeeper stepped into view, wiping her hands on a towel. She'd been standing silently at the edge of the chaos since the beginning, a quiet witness to years of abuse. Yes, Ava? I smiled softly. Would you like to stay on? I'll be renovating. And I want you here. Not as help. As family. Elaine's jaw dropped. The woman she used to scream at for not dusting fast enough now stood beside me, nodding through tears. Thank you, Mija, Mrs. Espinosa whispered. I turned back to Elaine. You can pack whatever you can carry. You have 30 minutes. Elaine's mouth worked, but no words came. Kennedy stood frozen, the full collapse settling over her like a thunderstorm. Where am I supposed to go? Elaine whispered. I leaned down slowly, keeping my voice low. Maybe ask your fate consultant. Or maybe go find some sympathy somewhere you haven't burned it to ash. Elaine didn't move. Tick-tock, I said gently. And then I walked out. Into the cold air, where the lights of squad cars still blinked. Where cameras were already flashing. Where neighbors whispered. But I didn't care. For the first time in years, I breathed. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was reclaiming. The house was quiet again. Not peaceful, just quiet. That strange stillness that happens after a storm flattens everything. I stood in the master bedroom, the one that used to be off-limits. The door was wide open now, the curtains drawn back. And I didn't knock. This was my house. I ran my fingers over the dresser, eyes catching on something odd, a false back in the drawer. Loose. I pulled it, and inside, another envelope. Not labeled, just sealed, old and yellowed. I opened it with shaking hands. Inside were two things, a letter in my mother's handwriting and a second paternity test. This one was for me. And the father's name? Not Alan. Not some stranger. Grandpa. My stomach flipped. The door creaked behind me. I turned. He sat there quietly in his wheelchair, like he knew. You read it, he said. You knew. He nodded. Since the day you were born. The walls in my chest started closing in. Why didn't you say anything? Because you were safer not knowing, he said, his voice low. Your mother, she and I, it wasn't meant to happen. But it did. And I've hated myself every day since. She made me swear never to tell you. Said she didn't want you growing up confused. So I stayed silent. But I made sure you had something when she was gone. I sat down on the edge of the bed, my head spinning. You made me believe I didn't belong here, I said. But I was more connected to this house than anyone. He looked at me with something I'd never seen in his eyes before, guilt. I didn't protect you the way I should have, he whispered. But I never stopped watching. Never stopped trying to fix what I broke. I didn't know what to say. So I said nothing. Just sat there. Heavy silence between us. Until finally I asked, why tell me now? He looked out the window. Because you're strong enough to decide what to do with the truth. I swallowed hard. You're not asking for forgiveness? No, he said, without flinching. I don't deserve it. I just want you to know not everything they told you was a lie. I stood slowly and walked to the window. Outside, the lawn was still littered with tire marks, police tape, broken pieces of the past. I turned back to him. I don't know what to do with this. You don't have to know today. But someday? He nodded. And when that day comes, he said, voice cracking, I'll still be here if you let me be. 2 weeks later, the house didn't feel like a battlefield anymore. The crime scene tape was gone. The reporters stopped circling. The whispers had faded. But inside me, everything was still shifting. I sat at the dining room table, my table now, where the lies used to be passed like salt and pepper. The house felt heavier, not from sadness but from meaning. Every wall held something. A scar. A secret. A truth that refused to die quietly. Grandpa hadn't left. He stayed in the guest room, recovering from a fall he had the night after our conversation. And though things between us were still messy, I let him stay. Not because he deserved it, but because I deserved to choose what forgiveness looked like. I poured 2 cups of coffee. One for me. One for Mrs. Espinosa. She sat across from me, holding a worn rosary in one hand, even though she never said a word about faith out loud. You've changed, she said, watching me closely. No, I replied. I just remembered who I was supposed to be. She smiled gently. Your mama would be proud. I looked away. I hope so. A knock at the door pulled me up. It was Kennedy. No makeup. Hoodie. Eyes red. Can I come in? I nodded. She stepped inside slowly, looking around like she was walking through someone else's memory. I didn't know about any of it, she said, her voice small. About Elaine. The money. The lies. I believe you, I said. Silence. Then she looked me dead in the eye. Do you hate me? I paused. No, I said finally. But I did. I don't blame you. I blamed myself, I whispered. For so long. For not being enough. For being invisible. For letting people walk over me. She looked down. I did that too, she said. To you. I nodded. Yeah. She took a deep breath. I don't want the house. I don't want the business. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. And for the first time, it felt real. She meant it. I nodded again. Thank you. As she turned to leave, I said, wait. She looked back. I don't know what our relationship is, but maybe someday it won't feel like war. Her eyes shimmered. I'd like that. She left. And just like that, a door I thought would stay closed forever cracked open. Later that night, I sat in my mother's old garden. The moonlight hit the wild lavender she planted before she died. I could almost hear her. Told you were stronger than them, Ava. I smiled to myself. Because this was more than revenge. More than reclaiming power. This was about rewriting the story they wrote for me,